The decision that New Mexicans are going to make in November is a big deal, a very big decision. And in New Mexico, we tend to, have our senators around for a while. And so it's not just the issues of today that matter, but who I am and the values that I represent come from, so you understand where I'm coming from. I wanted to recognize a couple of people here. Ches, of course, is one of the co-chairs of the Wilson for Senate campaign here in Otero County. Ed Brabson is another co-chair here in the county. Senator Burt, you want to stand up and...
He is. Oh.
Thank you for your service in Santa Fe. Very much appreciate that. And Rocky, you've been wonderful. Thank you so much for what you've done for the party here in Otero County. Did I miss any other local or elected officials, Rocky? I always do that, and then I feel bad afterwards. So thank all of you for being here on a weekday afternoon. I'm actually third generation Air Force, and Ches knows this, but my grandfather flew in the First World War. He was a flyer for the RAF, and then he didn't have, there was no work after the war was over, so he came to America in 1922, and then he got a job as a machinist, and he wrote home to my grandmother, and he asked her to come to America to marry him. And she did. She got married the day she got off the boat in the United States. And this is her wedding ring. I wear my grandmother's wedding ring as my own. And they raised a couple of boys, and my grandpa was a barnstormer and opened little airports and taught people to fly. He was a commercial pilot. And then my dad started flying when he was 13 years old in 1946. And he got his flying license on his 16th birthday. And my grandpa also flew in World War II for the United States of America. And when my father finished high school, he enlisted in the Air Force. He was a crew chief at Walker Air Force Base in Roswell, New Mexico. And after he got out of the Air Force, he went home. He married my mom, who was a nurse and his high school sweetheart. And he taught my mom how to fly airplanes. And they used to redo airplanes together. And so my mom stopped working when us 3 kids were born. And we lived in this little 2-bedroom house with a living room and a kitchen and a den. And the den was supposed to be my bedroom. But I was in with my 2 brothers because my dad was building an experimental open cockpit biplane inside our little house. So my mother was a very tolerant woman. When I was a junior in high school, they opened the Air Force Academy to women, and that looked like kind of an interesting thing. My dad died when I was young, but my grandpa was still alive, and I went to talk to him about it. He got real quiet. I mean, this is a man who had started flying shortly after the Wright brothers took off at Kitty Hawk and had lived to see a man walk on the moon. I mean, he lived this incredible life in aviation. And he had 2 sons. My dad was a pilot, my uncle was a parachutist and welder. And he had 5 grandsons, and me. And I was the one who thought maybe I'd like to be one of the early women to go to the Air Force Academy. But he had flown with some women Air Force service pilots in World War II. And he thought they were pretty good pilots. So with his blessing and a full ride scholarship, I became the first person in my family as a 2nd-generation American to go to college, which was a very big deal. I served all of my time in the Air Force overseas in Europe during the Cold War, and then came back and served on the National Security Council staff for the first President Bush during the time when the Berlin Wall fell, the Warsaw Pact collapsed, and we fought the First Gulf War. I then got reacquainted with a guy that I'd met in the Air Force. I knew him for 9 years, but it took him 9 years to ask me on a date, which is, well, it's a little slow. But he was here in New Mexico, and he had come initially to New Mexico to go to Philmont Scout Ranch when he was 14. And then when the Air Force said, "Where would you like to be stationed?" he said, "Well, somewhere near Philmont Scout Ranch, that would be good." And they stationed him in Kirtland. And he with the exception of 1 year up in Colorado, he was was in New Mexico ever since. He got off active duty, stayed in the reserve of the National Guard. They finally kicked him out after, I think, 30 or 33 years or whatever, said you're too old, retire, make a way for a younger guy. So he asked me to marry him. And so I came to New Mexico, and the best decision I ever made was to marry a guy named Jay Hone. So I came here, married him. I started a small business here, worked with two of our national labs. So I know what it means to sign the front side of a paycheck, to try to create jobs in small business in New Mexico, and to provide a service to others, and to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning wondering whether the accounts receivable are going to come due and come in before the accounts payable are due, and what that takes to run a small business. When Gary Johnson was elected governor, he was looking for somebody to run the Children, Youth, and Families Department. And my husband and I had been foster parents together. My husband was a foster parent as a single guy, which tells you something about him. And we were foster parents together, and we have one adopted son who's an adult. And we had seen the system from the perspective of foster parents. And I knew that I could make some things better there. And so I sold my small business to one of my employees and became the cabinet secretary for child welfare. And found that to be much more satisfying than I thought it was going to be. And we did some really important reforms for child welfare in New Mexico, trying to make it easier for foster kids to have forever families, and trying to find more options for kids who are in trouble with the law so they don't throw their lives away and send all of us to bill. And so I found that very satisfying. And one evening I was actually working late, and Steve Schiff was very ill. He was my predecessor in the house. And the phone rang, and I picked it up, and somebody said, "This is Pete Domenici." I thought, yeah, right. Fortunately, I didn't say that, because it was Pete Domenici. And he said, "I'm coming to New Mexico this weekend, and I want to talk to you about running for the Congress." Well, that was a quiz, not a question. If Pete Domenici calls and said, "I'd like to talk to you," the answer is, "Yes, sir. I'd be happy to talk to you." It isn't, "Well, I'll think about that," And so we sat down and we talked for several hours at Senator Domenici's family home in Albuquerque about the future of this country and about the challenges we face. And he told me that if I would run for the House of Representatives, that he would help me, and he did. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I'll help you," and they don't really. Pete Domenici was good to his word. And more than that, he also helped me to be a much better member of Congress than I otherwise would have been. I couldn't have asked for a better mentor in public life than Pete Domenici. I served in the Congress from 1998 to 2009, and for the last 3 years I've been back hassling a couple of teenagers. We have one who just graduated from high school, so we've just coped with a very severe case of senioritis, which I'm very glad is over. He is still eating out of our refrigerator and planning to go to college. And we've got my daughter just finished her freshman year of high school. So she is the queen of her universe, and she will make that clear. I'm a lot stupider than I used to be, but my friends tell me that I'll recover. My family is very close. I'm very blessed to have a close and loving family life, and family is very important to me. My responsibility to my family doesn't end at the front porch. I think I have a responsibility to my children to try to make sure that we don't burden them with debt in a country that they don't have an opportunity to do as well as we all did. That's just not fair, and it's not right. We have some big problems in this country, really big problems. And it's not going to be easy to get out of this. I mean, we've got financial troubles in the federal government. We've got a debt that is approaching $16 trillion. And over the last 3 years, Congressman Martin Heinrich and the President of the United States have extended that deficit and debt by $5 trillion. That is the steepest and fastest increase in American debt in American history. This is unsustainable.
Right.
The United States Senate hasn't even passed a budget since Pete Domenici retired from the United States Senate. And I wish it was just that part of the financial picture that we have to deal with, but it's not. I mean, we have had 40 straight months of over 8% unemployment. 40 straight months. And we haven't had that long a stretch of high unemployment since the Depression. And all of us have seen it. You know, the cost of groceries is up, cost of gasoline is up, the value of our homes is down, everybody's worried about their 401k and whether they're going to be the next small business that has to lay off somebody or close its doors or roll back. We have some serious, serious problems. And unfortunately, part of that problem has been Congressman Martin Heinrich and his extreme agenda in the United States Congress. This guy voted for the so-called stimulus and against the balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. That stimulus was $787 billion. I mean, when President Clinton wanted a stimulus, he proposed a $19 billion stimulus, and it was rejected by the Congress because that was too much money. And yet, $787 billion, and Congressman Heinrich says, yeah, but it saved or created 3 million jobs. Well, let's just take him at his word. I mean, let's not be skeptical about that part just for a second with me here. Do the math. 787 billion, so 9 zeros out there, divided by 3 million, 6 zeros out there. My 4th grade teacher told me how to do this long division trick where you knock off the 6 zeros at the end and do this. So that's 787,000 divided by 3. It's about $260,000 per job saved or created.
I'll take one of those.
Anybody here own a small business? Run a small business? If I gave you $260,000, could you create more than one job?
Oh, yeah.
But he's proud of that waste in government spending, because he doesn't understand where jobs come from. Anybody here want to pay more for your gas bill this month?
Nope.
Or your electric bill? He is advocating for more expensive energy for this country. I think his idea of an all-of-the-above energy strategy is all-of-the-above ground energy. I think we need a balanced long-term energy policy that includes wind, solar, and conservation, and natural gas, oil, coal, and nuclear. We need a balanced long-term energy policy for this country that recognizes the natural resources we have been blessed with are assets, not liabilities. And if he has his way, the cost of energy in this country will go sky high and the jobs will go overseas. That is a recipe for continued economic stagnation and killing jobs in America. Congressman Heinrich also voted for the Health Care Act. And he voted for it even though he didn't think it went far enough. He wanted the public option. He wanted a government-run health care system. It's bad enough that we've got the Health Care Act we do, which is unworkable, and it was unwise. The Supreme Court will decide whether it was unconstitutional. I happen to think it was. But it took $500 billion out of Medicare to fund new programs under the Health Care Act. Anybody here on Medicare? Did he ask you if you wanted to cut Medicare?
No, I haven't voted about that.
I mean, there's only one person running for the United States Senate who's voted to cut Medicare, and that is Congressman Martin Heinrich. So all of this stuff about how he's going to go and protect Medicare, unless he wants to have a government takeover of health care and tell you how you're going to get your health care. Particularly in rural areas, this is going to be devastating for our hospitals unless we get this repealed and replaced. Right now, half of docs in America will not accept new Medicare patients. 40% won't accept new Medicaid patients. And yet we're going to push a whole lot of people onto a public system, and it's going to collapse under the weight of this new bill. We need to get that law repealed and replaced. We have some tremendous challenges in this country. And I think it's about time that we send some leaders to Washington to take care of it. Now, I will stand up and fight for the things that I believe in. But I will also seek to find bipartisan compromise on issues that are important to New Mexicans. Let me give you an example. In 1984, Ronald Reagan and Daniel Patrick Moynihan and Tip O'Neill got together and solved a problem with Social Security that extended the solvency of Social Security for 30 years. I'm sure that Ronald Reagan didn't get everything he wanted, and neither did Tip O'Neill or Daniel Patrick Moynihan. But they didn't tear the country apart or fail to solve the problem. I think that's the kind of leadership that we need in the United States Senate, and that's what I hope to offer the people of New Mexico. One of the most important elections we will have this November is to choose the next United States Senator from New Mexico. And it won't be, there will be a very big difference between myself and my opponent, Congressman Martin Heinrich. I believe in free enterprise. I believe in a strong national defense. And Congressman Heinrich is the former lobbyist for the Sierra Club, and he thinks we need more taxes from Washington and more Washington control over our lives. It's very important for people to get registered to vote. If you're not registered to vote, you can go down to the county clerk's office, and also to get out and exercise that precious right to vote this November. I'll be in every county in the state between now and between Memorial Day and the 4th of July, all 33 counties. I've been to all 33 at least once now, most of them twice or 3 times, but I'll be back in every county of this state, meeting with voters, answering questions, so that you can make an informed choice in November. And if you want the country to continue to go down the path that it's on now, you have a choice. You can support Congressman Heinrich. But if you think we need to change direction, I'd very much appreciate your vote.